Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, out on another walk, and this time I'm carrying on my walk from the show we did where we looked at St Wilfred's chapel. I've moved just below, a bit to the south of the chapel. The chapel is actually behind me, behind those trees, and I'm looking at a rather interesting load of earth and earthworks. In fact, a Norman earthworks of the 11th century, and the man who can tell me a little bit more about it, of course, is Martin Snow. Hello, Martin.
Hello again, Richard.
So on our left, walking down, as we go down towards Pagham Harbour, which we're going to look at the magnificence in a second, we're passing behind this hedge, this rather remarkable 11th century earthworks. What was it for?
Well, it was to defend a fortification by the look of it. There was a tower.
It's a ringwork, isn't it?
It's a ringwork.
It's a ringwork.
Yes.
And they're easily slung up, better than a Motte and Bailey castle.
A stonework.
A stonework thing. Although there's, they think that there was a Norman tower
Norman tower just over there behind us.
Right, behind. I mean, there's not that much to see other than just these sort of artificial man-made mounds here that was at one time this defensive period in the Norman history. But I'm a little bit more interested in earlier than that, because back in the Saxon days, in the days of the original occupation after the Romans, from the Saxons coming in, we're here in the Scelzi Peninsula down in West Sussex, and this area was an island back then.
Effectively, yes.
Effectively. I mean, not an island like in the middle of the ocean or anything, but it's cut off a bit from the mainland.
Yes, certainly at high tide, and it was cut off.
So here, somewhere on this whole area was the landing for those Saxons when they very first came, the South Saxons, I suppose, because the Saxons would have landed at various places across the UK.
Yes.
Yeah. And so this being there, I mean, they chose this place because I guess it was easy to get to, easy to access.
That's right, yes, nice and flat.
We're just passing a little noisy dog in the background as we come down to what is Pagham Harbour. And Pagham Harbour, as you can see, I mean, it's an area of scientific interest. It's also a place of natural beauty, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Let's walk this way to our left, because in the distance there's some things that you can just make out. The steeple of a church there.
Yes, that's the Peckham Church.
So Pagham, the village of Pagham is right over there
in front of us. Yes.
The other side of the harbour, because the harbour's quite a large space, isn't it?
It is. It's more than just a drop.
Yes. And it's a natural harbour. By that I mean it's naturally made and formed. It's not a harbour that's
been built.
You think of like a port, although it may well have been used by the boats of the Saxons coming in.
Yes, there was a harbour called Wardour in this area, but they still haven't been able to discover exactly where it was.
Right.
But it's thought to be over to the north of us.
And that's boats would have moored up there and brought their goods in.
Yes, much smaller than today, of course.
Yes. Of course, these days it's known for its as a wildlife reserve, and so you get people coming with their long lenses, their cameras and their long lenses, photographing all sorts of wading birds, all sorts of things. You get geese coming down in the winter.
Yes, we heard them.
We've heard
earlier.
them and we've seen them. Of course, we point our camera and no such luck. But let's take a little stroll out here into a bit more of the area, because the colours are absolutely gorgeous. In the distance, there is the gap where the tide comes in from the English Channel.
That's right.
And isn't there a thing that they tried, I think, in the Victorian period to drain the harbour so they could turn this area into farmland?
That's right. They closed off the gap.
They closed off the gap,
and they managed to reclaim it for about 30 or 40 years.
Yes.
I think it was 1910. The sea claimed its own.
It breached the gap. And came back.
We're back to.
And consequently, they never bothered since.
And they haven't bothered since.
No. And it's absolutely beautiful. Let's carry on wandering round.
Yes, I suspect it's for the best. Otherwise, Bognor would have carried on stretching and built on. They've probably built on most of this. So
Yes, absolutely. I mean, once you've claimed land with all the new builds and stuff, this would no longer be such a beautiful place to
That's
come
exactly
and
right.
photograph wildlife. I said at the beginning that this whole peninsula was an island.
yes,
Or effectively an island.
effectively an island.
Of course, over time, it's no longer an island,
It's
really.
silted up. That's right.
Yeah, and that's the natural process of our land. That a bit like our place in Broadbridge. Broadwater. I was going to say
Near Worthing.
Broadbridge Heath. Then. That's near Horsham. Broadwater. Yeah, that was the same story there.
Same story. It's silted up. It was an inlet, and nature.
Nature does. That's because land changes over time,
That's right.
and the tide and
time.
time. That's the
I
word.
can never remember the expression.
Yeah, tide and time waits for no man.
No, waits for no man.
That's
it.
right. We've walked around. Well, we've driven round. I'll be fair, because it's quite a big harbour. We've moved round. That's the words I was really looking for. We've moved round to more to the never eat fretted wheat east of the harbour, down in Siddlesham. Is that right?
Siddlesham, yes.
And you wanted us to come here because, apart from all the beautiful views and all the wildlife and all of that, and there's some nice looking houses over there, there's a historic interest. Shall we walk up this way?
Yes.
And then you can tell me a little bit about it. What was there here?
Well, there was a tide mill here.
Tide mill, right.
Which used the it pounded water when the tide rose, and then let it out past the grindstones to grind the flour.
Right. Now, we went to a tide mill at Bishopstone, didn't we, near
That's
Newhaven?
right, we did indeed.
So, and that's on our video, and you can check that out, where there were remnants of the building there. And here, as you can see, there's actually nothing at all. There's some nice houses and what looks like a big garage or something. This is the site where the mill was.
Yes, we're stood inside. We would be stood inside it.
It said on one of the boards there we just passed that it's possibly one of the grandest mills in the land, and it dates right back to Saxon times.
Yes.
Three big wheels?
Three big wheels under the building.
Right.
So
turned by the water to grind the flour.
Simply by the force of the tide.
Right. And
going out.
And over here we've got this edge. If I step off here, which is, I think, the line of where the building was.
That would have been the edge of the building.
And then this is the quayside, is it?
That's right. This is the quayside.
And at the quayside would have been where the materials were brought in.
Bring the corn in and take the flour
and take the flour away. It's hard to believe that once upon a time that there were boats and or at least barges coming in and tying up here. It's all gone now. So what happened, Martin?
Well, after the land was reclaimed, the tide would no longer be available to power the wheels.
So eventually, I suppose it became uneconomic to keep the tide mill going, and as we saw at Bishopstone, the masonry was sold off.
That's right, yes. Apparently during the First World War, all the masonry disappeared into local houses.
Yeah, and why not do that? Because the building would only go to rack and ruin if you can make money from that masonry.
Exactly.
You pay a few debtors, no doubt. Let's stroll up here. So this whole area is worthy of more investigation and more exploration, I guess. And we will come back and we will do something like that. So Martin, thank you very much for another
my pleasure.
Interesting and exciting little trip into history and the beauty of the Scelzi Peninsula. And it's all, thanks to those Saxons who came here all that time ago. And so join us again on another little trip, and we'll take you somewhere else. Until then, goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.